Welcome back to Fossil versus Future. I'm Daisy.
And I'm James.
And today we're going to talk about...
What about the Middle East?
The Middle East and North Africa, often called the MENA region, describes a diverse group of around 19 to 27 countries, depending on the definition used. Together, they are home to around 500 million people. A smaller subset of the region is the Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC, a political and economic alliance of 6 countries: Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and Oman. The MENA region sits at the heart of the world's energy system. The Middle East is home to 5 of the world's top 10 oil producers: Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, Iran, and Kuwait, as well as 3 of the world's top 20 gas producers. Roughly 1/3 of global oil production comes from the region, which holds over half of the world's proven oil reserves. This concentration of energy resources has shaped regional economies, politics, and geopolitics, and has drawn repeated foreign interventions alongside major conflicts. Fossil fuels dominate both production and consumption. Nearly 95% of electricity generated in the Middle East comes from oil and natural gas, the highest share anywhere in the world. While total greenhouse gas emissions are relatively low globally, around 8.7% of the world total, countries like Qatar, Kuwait, the UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia rank among the highest per capita carbon emitters in the world. Energy demand is rising rapidly. Between 2000 and 2024, electricity demand in MENA tripled, making the region the 3rd largest contributor to global electricity demand growth after China and India. Population growth, urbanization, and rising living standards are all driving this surge, along with intensifying climate pressures. The region is warming at more than twice the global rate, and summer temperatures regularly exceed 40 degrees Celsius. MENA is also the most water-scarce region in the world, with 60% of people living in areas of high or extremely high water stress. But the region also has enormous potential for renewable energy. It receives 22 to 26% of all solar energy striking the Earth, and its solar potential per square kilometre is equivalent to 1 to 2 million barrels of oil per year, enough to theoretically meet at least half of global electricity demand. Wind resources are also abundant, with around 75% of the region experiencing wind speeds suitable for utility-scale farms. Despite this, only 7% of electricity in the Middle East was generated from clean sources in 2023, compared with a global average of 39%. So MENA faces a stark paradox. Its countries rely on the global fossil fuel economy, yet the region is also one of the world's most climate-vulnerable areas. Navigating extreme heat, water scarcity, and the energy transition will be critical, not just for its people, but for the planet as a whole.
Very good. Well, there were lots of reasons why I wanted to do this episode. The first is partly because I grew up in the Middle East, first 10 years of my life in Lebanon. Partly because of all the things you said, this is a region that holds a lot of the future in its hands.
Definitely.
And partly because I see in operation what I've described before as the biggest hedge in economic history, by which I mean the transference of high carbon rents from the fossil fuel economy into investment in a low carbon future. And a low carbon future not just for them, but for what now often gets used, I don't know how regular it is, I just like this phrase that I kind of borrowed from a conversation that took place between Michael Liebreich and Lord Brown, John Brown, on his podcast, on Michael's podcast, Cleaning Up, where instead of using the phrase the rest of the world, somehow an alternative to Europe and North America and China, the most of the world phrase has emerged. And I like it because that's where the most of the people live, you know. And it's often neglected and doesn't feature enough in our conversations about what the future might look like. And in particular, the energy future and the energy future in the climate change affected world. And Michael and I did an event at the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week where this was being discussed. And it was really obvious at that huge exhibition. I mean, Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week is a series of conferencey type events together with a trade show. And if you really wanted to have a look at what the future energy system for the most of the world looks like, go and have a look at what's on display at the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. And if you want to figure out who's going to invest in that transition in the most of the world, it's the money in the oil-producing countries of MENA. And this, as you say, it's a paradox, it's a hedge, it's having two thoughts in your head at the same time. There'll be a conference the next week, a trade event the next week full of fossil fuel businesses.
It's a contradiction.
It's a contradiction. And as I walked around because I've been a few times to this event, and my God, it's grown.
Is it every year?
Yeah. The halls, the exhibition halls, are vast at this centre, and they are full of the technologies that will make the transition away from fossil fuels. And most of them are companies you've never heard of. I mean, obviously there's some big brand names there that you will have done, but there's a whole bunch of exhibitors of the latest and best technologies in solar, wind, batteries, electric vehicles. And there are brand names you've never heard of, and they're mostly Chinese.
Interesting.
They're Chinese, they're Korean, they're Indian. You know, they've come, there were some European brands there, but you'd be hard-pushed to find a single American brand on display. And the money, the investment that is going to go into that transition is coming from companies like Masdar. In fact, I was there in part because of my connection with one of the Octopus boards, and Octopus signed a partnership agreement with Masdar for investment in the UK in data centres, but also a new fund for investment in Africa. And one of the businesses I've been involved with since the very beginning, Ignite Energy Access now, that business is moving to Abu Dhabi and will be headquartered in Abu Dhabi because they won the Zayed Prize a few years ago at one of the COPs, the COP in Dubai. And the Abu Dhabi government and other backers associated with the Zayed Prize have encouraged, incentivized Ignite to move their business to Abu Dhabi. And so that's a solar business in Africa funded by Abu Dhabi and others, but that's where they're going to be based now. And this is part of the Emiratis' commitment to that hedge, the alternative to fossil fuels, growing in their own, in Abu Dhabi itself.
And the Zayed Prize is a award for innovation,
It is.
isn't it? So from what I've been reading, it seems like such a centre for innovation, that region. It's really pushing boundaries in terms
Really
of
going
what these
fast.
companies are working on.
Yeah.
I think this year's energy winner was a company doing cooling as a service, I
Yeah.
saw. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
It's a good theme, isn't it? I mean, a city like that and cities throughout the MENA region massively increased their energy consumption for cooling. And if you've got many 40-degree days in the year, it's not hard to see why. But it also creates terrible inequalities. There are already difficulties in the region with gap between rich and poor. There are disadvantaged people in all of those jurisdictions who do not have access to air conditioning, and their life is going to be intolerable. And yet the air conditioning systems we've got today are very inefficient, and the wastefulness is evident. It's even rather insulting. If you've got a tall, plush, apartment block with air conditioning units, they're pushing heat out into the street. Anyway, cooling is going to have an enormous effect on demand and needs to be better managed. Whilst I was there, I met the people who are behind the huge solar investment, well, Masdar itself, but also Engie in the Emirates, just outside of Abu Dhabi. And that's producing electrons. I've forgotten I should have come with the exact number, but a staggeringly low price for power. And because of the solar resource you described, once you build out these substantial solar arrays and can get electrons at that price, it creates huge opportunities to build enterprises around that. So the innovation system, the many businesses and industries, as well as the residential cooling and all the other needs for it, it all becomes more manageable when you can make electrons that cheaply.
I don't know whether it's the same facility, but I was reading that Masdar are building the largest solar plus battery project that will run for 24 hours a
That's
day.
it. That was the
Is
one I
that the
was
same
thinking of.
one?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that one apparently will displace 5.7 million tons of carbon dioxide each year, which is equivalent to planting 100 million trees
Yeah.
and covering 90 square kilometres, so the size of Copenhagen for a
Yeah.
solar facility.
I think that's something we should
Fast.
get across to the folk that are listening to this. This transition is underway and it's big. These are big projects. There's a weird sense of maybe it's more in my generation. There's a really failure to comprehend.
The
These are not,
scale.
yeah, these are not little. They just somehow visualize a solar panel here and so. These are massive projects,
Yeah.
and actually, there've been a lot of the pioneering projects of scale in the world are in the region. I mean, I remember vividly when I was advising Morocco during its presidency that the Saudi enterprise, Aqua Power,
Hmm.
built that huge solar array in Morocco. And Aqua Power is a major developer of solar and desalination projects worldwide. There's a lot of great engineering competence in the region. Uh, you know, Egypt is developing huge wind resources. Again,
Yeah, they
incredibly,
have really fast wind speed
absolutely
in
amazing,
Egypt.
and very low cost. Again, just going back to Michael Liebreich again, he's done a really useful, simple calculation, inspired by going to Egypt and really having a look at what solar and renewables developers were building out in Egypt, and asking a simple but profound question for countries that have, shall we say, have to be very careful with the investment resources they've got and have many people who are really in need of as cheap energy. I mean, it's the same the world over, but you know what I mean. There are just jurisdictions where there's real vulnerability,
Hmm.
economic vulnerability. So, you have to spend your money carefully to create an energy system that's different from what you inherited if you're a leader. So he asked a question, what, pick any unit, 100, a billion, whatever it is. If you've got $1 billion to spend, how much usable energy, the energy that you actually use to drive an economy, how much do you get for your $1 billion comparing oil, gas, coal,
Interesting.
renewables? And I mean, we'll put it in the notes, his calculation. But the essence of his calculation is you just get so much more from renewables. Your $1 billion spend gets you more usable energy than any of the fossil fuel alternatives by a lot, not a close run thing. So the economic case for this transformation is strong. The vulnerabilities you describe are really evident. I mean, I don't know how we build societies that cope with 40 plus
Yeah, close
for
to
a lot of the
50
year
on the
and
hottest
50
days.
often in the region,
Yeah.
often. You can imagine, we've talked about this before, of having to do outdoor work at night. If you sit in some of these newly constructed cities, you do wonder, how is this going to continue? And the chances are, if you've got the money, you can probably build in some resilience. But you'll have to do it in a very dedicated and thoughtful way. Otherwise, these places are going to be unlivable in.
But even though these renewable technologies make financial sense and there's more and more proof of the investment case of these renewable projects, the region and countries like Saudi Arabia specifically still rely so heavily on fossil fuels and make so much money from fossil fuels. I was reading that Saudi Aramco, which is the biggest corporate emitter in the world, I think responsible for 4.4% of global emissions.
It's a big
One
company.
company. They banked $250 million of profit per day from 2016 to 2023. So it costs $2 to get a barrel of oil out of the ground, and that was selling for around $60 to $80.
Yeah.
So although renewables make money, oil
No,
still
in a
makes
very
a
different way.
lot
In a
of
very
money.
different way. The profile of an investment in fossil fuels is completely different to one in renewables. They have there's just no comparison. Renewables have steady utility type returns over a long period of time. It's true in some
Rather
cases
than
where
short-term wins now.
with fossil fuels there's much greater volatility. But once these enterprises get really big, they can manage that. It is interesting, though, that Saudi Arabia as a nation is building out these enormous projects, big
Oil
cities.
projects, sorry?
No, I mean
Renewable.
just urban development
Oh, yeah.
and massive. NEOM is the one
Yeah.
everyone thinks about, this sort of line in the desert.
line.
And it's all very futuristic, and it takes a lot of money. Now, it takes a lot of money, and I'm by no means an expert at this, so forgive me if I'm a little bit vague. But my understanding is that partly because of the amount of subsidy which is still there in the way fossil fuels are used, partly because of these huge projects that are being developed at great cost, Saudi Arabia needs oil prices to be higher than 60, in fact, closer to 80.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's an interesting dilemma for them because, yes, there are very high, and of course there have been periods of time where the oil price has been much higher than it is today. But eventually that hedge between high and low carbon starts to become quite a severe friction between which of those systems wins out. And you'd like to be very well prepared for the day in which you cannot fund the nation when a demand for oil goes down or when the price of oil falls below various key thresholds. So all of those nations have got their own different calculus as to what price of oil or gas they need in order to run the economy that they currently have.
Okay.
And it's vulnerable and volatile. It's volatile to geopolitics, but it's also volatile to significant changes in demand. And again, it's quite hard to see how the oil producers would not be vulnerable to a significant shift in demand from, say, the electrification of transport. I mean, we've talked about China in the past, it being so big that the more electric vehicles they have in their fleet, in their nation's fleet, the more likely that demand for liquid fossil fuels stabilizes, as it is now, and then declines. And I don't think anybody really knows how quickly that could happen. But I sense it's not going to be nice and gentle and gradual. We've talked a lot, I think, about making the energy transition as smooth, if you like, without a disorderly transition that leaves a lot of assets stranded and a lot of economic loss and a lot of conflict that will come with people feeling like their world has fundamentally changed. That's a big political issue. Just like taking subsidies away is always a big political issue. If your population has become used to subsidize oil and gas, it's very hard to say, sorry, that's over now. Although it might be necessary. It's a question of how you do it. But I can't see where new demand is going to come from once these alternatives start to scale up. And I hope it's not just wishful thinking either, because I don't want to be delusional, but I just can't see it.
Plastics?
Plastics.
I think in the same way that we hear in the media about at the COP conferences, Saudi is an example of a country that does seem to not agree on certain text being included in, in COP decisions.
They've long
related to fossil fuels, for
got
example,
in the way of
at
agreement.
COP30. And I think that was similar with the Global Plastic Treaty, because these countries are going to rely on plastics more and more as the use of fossil fuels for energy decreases.
Yeah, they're shifting the emphasis for sure. They have been for a while now.
Yeah. So even though these countries are really supportive of these new technologies, at the same time, they're not ready to let go of
No,
fossil
they're going to
fuels
happen in
just
parallel.
yet. Yeah.
And they are happening in parallel. This is why it is a hedge. They'll keep going, but the timing of it, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, I just don't see. I don't see how an oil-producing country avoids a sharp drop in demand once economies start to electrify, and when they do it across sectors, and when they converge. We talked about it. I know it's like I feel like a bit like a start record, but where can fossil fuels get in? Take plastics away for a moment,
Yeah.
because they are definitely going to use fossil fuels to make plastics. And yes, we've talked about alternatives to plastics too, but at the moment they're very small. Electric vehicles are not very small. Making electrons from renewables, it's not small.
Not small.
And it's at the moment it's a small percentage of a whole economy, but it's very easy to build out renewables at scale in all of these countries we're talking about, and come out in front economically. So when renewables plus storage, that example, the 24/7 example, is a classic one, and there it is, right in their own jurisdiction. Renewables plus storage plus digital management of electrons plus electric vehicles, and then the vehicle to grid loop that we've talked about before of how batteries in cars can be connected to a grid system. Software exists for that. When all those parts are connected, where does fossil fuel get in? That system excludes them. They're not relevant. And where does it matter? Well, it matters in the big jurisdictions like China. It would matter in the US. That's not going to happen for the time being, but who knows what happens later. There's no doubt there's a big policy push in Europe to go that way, but our economy is not as dynamic as China's building stuff. That's a classic engineering-based political system.
Mm-hmm.
All the top folks are engineers, and they love building stuff. So they are manufacturing at scale. The BYD stand in Abu Dhabi was amazing.
They're the electric vehicle company.
Have we talked about the size of BYD before?
No, I don't think so.
I know as I walk, the two big firms that we are getting to know about here that were very visible at this event in Abu Dhabi. BYD and CATL, CATL, is the batteries business, and they're kind of, anyway, they're symbolic, emblematic of what's happening in China. BYD, they haven't finished yet, but they are building a plant in Shenzhen that is enormous. It's bigger than any town outside London. It's taking up an area that's about half the size of Greater London. It's about the size of the Greater Nottingham. If you took Nottingham and Birmingham and looked at, that's how big it is. It's measured in square miles. It's enormous.
Wow.
And that's the ambition of the place. That's one car company. CATL now have, CATL, they have 4 plants in Europe now, including in Germany.
Oh, really?
They are producing batteries that are cheaper and more efficient than anything that's gone before. And next year there'll be another version of it. It's just extraordinary. So, and then if you look at who's taking up this technology apart from China itself, there's fierce competition with India. India wanting to match them. They're behind in the race, but they're desperately trying to catch up to make their own versions of all of these things. And India is starting to increase the amount of electric vehicles, especially small vehicles, last mile delivery vehicles. But other smaller states in the region, Indonesia is huge, but I was thinking more in terms of the manufacturing. They're, again, electric vehicle take-up in Indonesia, Malaysia,
Nepal
Thailand.
as well.
Nepal, extraordinary, yeah.
80% or something.
Sri Lanka now. So you have all those examples of a fundamental shift in a key demand area for fossil fuels in the region. And then, of course, you've got Norway, which is now almost exclusively electric vehicles. And once you've built the infrastructure for it, again,
Why not?
why not? And then, so I can't see where the new demand comes from. No one in their right mind now would build an oil-fired power station, right? They might still build gas, fair enough. And, the combustion engine has got a limited future pretty much everywhere. I mean, I can't see where that, apart from maybe in the States, which is weird, isn't it? I mean, it's a weird thing to imagine that there might be this split between the most of the world
Yeah, I was going to say.
and the US, But even now, I don't think, for all the politics, and it's true that this US administration is absolutely deadly serious at not just hanging on to the fossil fuel economy, but promoting it as against clean energy. I mean, it's not a small thing either. It's a very deliberate attempt to use their power to favor fossil fuels as against renewables and electric vehicles.
Which sounds like quite a contrast to what you were seeing in the MENA region.
Complete contrast, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not happening.
Was there any conversation around carbon capture and storage as a way to keep fossil fuels for a bit longer?
Yes. Although, again, the economics, the CCS, in order to maintain oil and gas, doesn't make a lot of sense. That's just all cost, really. It makes more sense with industrial emissions, cement, for example, or steel, sequestering the emissions from that. But, why would you? I mean, the amount of money spent on that could be better spent electrifying.
Yep.
Same with hydrogen, really. The use case for hydrogen is getting smaller and smaller. Makes no sense for domestic households. Makes very little sense now for any type of vehicle. I think in the past we thought it would for long-haul trucks, for example. But now the Chinese, again, have shown us that batteries win. And here in Europe, there are producers, designing and building electric vehicles to carry heavy weights long distances. So not there.
Nuclear?
Obviously, the region is investing in nuclear too, yes. Yeah, they are. I think, again, making the point that they have the capital to do that. And then the issue, as is the case anywhere, is what is the price to build your nuclear capacity? We seem to spend an astonishing amount of money. The other stat that I got out from talking about this issue with folks who are really in the know, is that we think of nuclear as expensive.
Yeah.
Right? The Chinese don't. And someone gave me the stat that for the price of Sizewell C, China can build 10. So it's a 10-to-1 cost. The Chinese can build 10 nuclear power stations for the price of our one. This is one of the weird things that we've become really bad at building out infrastructure at the right price and on time. We've got HS2, which is pretty embarrassing, the cost of that. Yeah. We seem to find it really difficult to get stuff done at the right price. And, at the same time, let's face it, we are not like China, and we're not going to be, and we can't aspire to that form of government, right? We can't. That's not on our agenda.
And I don't know how much workers would be paid. And
right,
things like
and
that.
also just the way things are decided, we couldn't tolerate. But we have to figure out something in between, because we need to build infrastructure, right? And we need to do it at the right price, and we need to do it on time. It's crazy how long it takes us to get anything done. And when I say us, I'm thinking about the UK, but it's just as bad in the States. Your infrastructure in the States looks really old and tatty, and it's very difficult to build anything. And we need to build a new energy system. We just do. And I got encouragement for how that's going to happen in the most of the world at a time when you can be fairly gloomy about that getting done in the so-called developed or Western or some other phrase that doesn't seem adequate anymore. So I feel as the way I'm viewing this hedge is that one doesn't look away from the fact that these are still fossil fuel-based economies. They're still exporting heavily. But I sense their own vulnerability. I sense that they are pouring money into alternatives. And once those alternatives start to grip, then fossil fuels will fade away. And I'd like that to be soon from the point of view of climate change. But I'd also like it to be thought through and understood so that there isn't a lot of dislocation and disruption and conflict.
I mean, going back to Masdar again, I think they have projects in over 40 countries globally. So, like you say, these projects are just all over the world. But then Masdar, I think one of their biggest shareholders is the ADNOC,
Is
right?
ADNOC, yeah.
The oil company.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
again, it's this weird.
Do you remember all the drama about Dr. Sultan, who was the...
Oh, COP28.
Do you remember COP28? There was a huge amount of abuse from the NGO world.
So he's chairman of Masdar and CEO of
ADNOC, yeah.
Yeah.
And there you have it. What else do you need to say? If you go and you see the massive ADNOC skyscraper, the power is still in the petroleum-based economy. But it's also shifting. And again, just to take Michael into the conversation again, I thought one of the aspects of his climate change reset thesis, which he came out with last year in Bloomberg and on his own podcast, one aspect of that I really did find valuable was this notion that if you just persevere and concentrate on building out more renewables, or doing more electrification in as many places as possible, little by little you win. You don't need to drive out fossil fuels tomorrow. You're not going to anyway, right? There's not some supreme power out there that's just going to knock all that into a dustbin. But if you meet new demand and a bit more year on year, and we are doing that, then you get there. Now, whether you get there in time,
fast enough,
I do get the worry about that, and I've been doing this for a very long time, and I wish we'd started earlier. But I'm encouraged by the fact that we are getting there, and I do see value in this hedge. It's not just that the capital is there. The capital is interested in going into the most of the world, as you described with Masdar, in 40 different countries, and there'll be more in due course. And a lot of our capital is not interested.
I was going to say, taking
right?
a risk that others aren't willing to take.
Yeah. I reckon that's worth a round of applause because, if we want the growing economies to grow in a way that is clean, they need capital and they need access to it and they need it right now. And they need all the incentives you could possibly wish for to avoid that pathway for our own benefit. And that money has got to come from somewhere, and it's not coming from the States, right?
Nope.
There's not enough of it coming from Europe. Too many reasons not to. Years of trying to make money move into emerging markets, as they're called. I wish they weren't. But I'm happy with most of the world. I like most of the world now. I want to see money move into those jurisdictions where renewables and electrification make perfect sense.
Amazing potential.
A huge potential. Where's that money going to come from? Well, I think it's going to come, a lot of it's going to come from the MENA region, and particularly from the Gulf, from the wealthy part of the region. But, there's a lot of domestic capital in Morocco. I mean, we've had, let's face it, some pretty disastrous regimes in North Africa. It's not the most stable place in the world. There's still a lot of conflict. But one way to manage, to find peace and prosperity is to invest heavily in the energy infrastructure that allows economies to thrive. And that energy infrastructure needs to be as clean as humanly possible, and not in a an absolutist sense. Because a lot of those jurisdictions can and should continue to use gas, for example, right? Of which there is plenty. Qatar has got probably the cheapest gas that they can make available. Egypt has gas. There's gas all the way through North Africa. I am not so absolutist about the green agenda that I think you can't use gas. But you need to use gas to support your renewables, not the other way around.
Yeah.
In the terms of percentages.
Mm-hmm.
The game is won when the MENA region has mostly renewables supported by gas,
And
not
these
the other way
countries
around.
have
They've got all the
well.
resources. Yeah.
Like Saudi Arabia, for example, is aiming for 50% renewables by 2030, which is not very far away.
And if you think about it, why would that make economic sense for Saudi, right?
Yeah.
Well, the simple answer is they do. They have in the past, and they're trying desperately to ease off it, but they subsidize massively their own population.
Yeah.
And
they spend more on fossil fuel subsidies than on healthcare.
Do they?
Yeah.
Wow. There's a stat.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, right. Point made. They also will have more to export. For the time being, there is demand. They'll be able to export more the more they do renewables at home. But ultimately, it's just it's the mass physics and chemistry of it. You know, that renewables and storage, producing electrons, driving the economy, usable energy, never mind primary energy. That's kind of, so what? That's the past. What matters is usable energy for running an economy where real people live and work and where there is a massive vulnerability. If you really focus on usable energy, electrons are better, even if you're a producer of fossil fuels. And then it's all about how long is the transition, how do we manage it, how do we get more people involved who feel like that's their future. That's the narrative in the region. And you'd hope that the next generation gets that, feels like their future lies in that order. Clean first, supported by.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It is. And as you say, it's a lot of people in that region. And you'd want them, you want them to have an attractive future in the real world, not the one that pretends that we haven't got a problem called climate change.
Well, I guess they're feeling it so intensely with water access, for example. Like desalination in the region provides a huge amount of the water there, and that's only going to rise with climate change.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you hit upon a couple of the big themes that are felt by people. Water, access to water, fair distribution of water, and heat. They also experience these weird instant floods in urban areas where unexpected amounts of rainfall arrive in a hurry and get channeled through hard surfaces and cause flooding of subways. And that's happened too. It's not like the region is got no problem with flood, but it is mostly water, cooling, and it's a sheer cost of maintaining a growing economy, one that's also very interested in AI, by the way. Huge investments going into that, again, more energy. The more you can build a robust, secure, and abundant energy system, mostly clean, the better the prospects of, if you like, the right kind of development in a region where a lot of people live.
We tend to blame these countries after the climate conferences, after the COPs, but that's the wrong.
It's not a good enough response. People rush quickly to the greenwashing, which is an abusive term. It might be legitimate in some instances, but you're not really picking up the complexity of the issue, and you're not looking hard enough at what's actually going on if you use that phrase in this region. I'd like to think that a better attempt to understand, to make human connections with people who live and work there, and to appreciate the absolute necessity of making capital, technology, and kind of human endeavor combine, because this is an ambition associated with the energy transition. It requires real human effort. It's not straightforward, and you want to admire that, not criticize too quickly.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to Fossil versus Future. Please subscribe to our podcast and give us a rating, and please follow us on social media. Let us know the what about questions that you want us to discuss.